Sar v'godoil nofal esmoil b'Yisrael. I'd like to dedicate the shir to say a few words of tribute, ha'arocha, maybe divrei mispeid, sher besori hagoyen hagodl, Reb Avrom Osban Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, who was nistalek befetza pitoim. Gleich noch zogen ashir. Yesterday was the Levaye, and tomorrow he's going to be muvo likvuro be'eretz Yisrael. So we're now in the time between the Levaye and the Kvura. I'd like to say a few words, divrei zikoroin and divrei sairerus lezichroi. Emesir Adarkoi in Yerushalmi in second parak in Shkolim steht Yerushalmi ein oisim nefosheis latzadikim. Tanya Rabbi Shimon Gamliel loimer ein oisim nefosheis latzadikim divreihem heim zichroinu. So instead of trying to speak about him, I'll try to dig mit der Hoym Anishiyah from the Zikaron, a few encounters that I had a shaykhs with him over the past few decades, and from there to learn, to shatz up the mensch, and to learn something for the Greise Zikaron of the Nifter. Reb Avrom was an Olam Gadol, Mishachar Tal Yaldusoi, Hoyrosoi Veleidosoi, the Beis Hoyrov, Hagoyen Reb Isaac, and Rebbetzin Chaya Osband, the daughter of Reb Avrom Yitzchok, the Tel Zerov, Ha'enekel from Reb Yosef Leib, and Ha'ur Ha'enekel from Hagoyen Reb Leizer Gordon, Reb Leizer Telzer. B'ma'alolo v'isnaker nar, just as a child, I wasn't around still, I knew him, I was already a bar mitzvah bocher, and he was a bocher in Shidduchim. His kishroines, his personality, his outstanding, profound qualifications, which were second to none, his pikches, his havone, his gishmakait, was second to none. We saw it from Kind Vaizon, learned all of an istapeg, came to Eretz Yisrael. Mein Rebbe, sein Rebbe, Reb Yesheber, Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, od gitschatschket mit him. He was the pearl of his eye. He was somebody who we knew, amikem mitem reden umitum, on any topic, on every subject, and everything with so much clarity, with so much pikches, with so much yashres, with a seichel hayoisho, with meseks fosaim, mamesh. Every time he opened his mouth, I remember from his engagement, his droshe, was fosaim yishak meishiv dvorim nechoich. I would like to focus on a few nekudas, which is negea tahas. I'm sure people will speak about divrei chizuk v'yisayrus. I'd like to say over what I received from him and to learn up. Vasi given Reb Avremel zecher tzadik livroch. 18 years ago, Gimel Tammuz Tovshin Samach Vov, in unfortunate circumstances, he had a daughter who was killed in a car accident in Monsey. Her name was Leah, and she was killed. She was a youngster, and she was killed in a car accident. I went to Menachem Ovel. Wir setzen dort in Greise Menschen. Everybody was Menachem him. V'choheino, v'choheino. I walked in, and he said, people asked him, how do you cope with such a tragedy? It's a gewaltige Sach. Steht doch, Mako she'eino ksuvo batero, Yakho Hashem b'maka sheli ksuvo b'sefer hazeh. In Sifri steht, ze misas tzadikim, and the goyin is goyres, ze misas bonim. So somebody who has a child, Meis Alponov, is a gewaltige tragedie. and he saw it as an Isayin. And they asked him, and this is what I remember very clearly and precisely, that I heard two nekudas from him, Be'isa Maimed. He said, Übersagen a Wort von Seiden, von Tel Zerov, Reb Avram Yitzchok Bloch, his namesake. Reb Avremel was named after his Zayde. His name was Reb Avram Yitzchok, he was Mechune Yitzale, but his father was named Reb Zayir Yitzchok Isaac. They couldn't give him a name Yitzchok, they gave him a partial name Avram. But he said, Amoyer de Kazach, he said, in Parshas Vayero state Avram Avinu is mispalo. It's a time where Kadosh Baruch Hu make ma'peches doim ve'amoyer admo tzvoim, and everything is getting totally eradicated. Avram Avinu comes and with his tefillah would like to be mevatel the gzeire. So he starts, he says, Ula yesh chamishim tzadikim b'soich ha'ir. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, there are no 50, goes down to 45, to 40, to 30. Sora tzadikim. And the question is obvious, the Rishonim already muchetzach. If Avram Avinu could ask for a Sora tzadikim, he knows Avram Avinu knew as anshes doim is anoshim roim v'chatoim lashem. Why does it start with a number, keilu, or bargaining, some kind of a auction, Chinese auction? You start at 50, okay, you don't want 50, let's go down to 45, let's go down to 40. Why does Avram Avinu come and say, Eibishter, if there's a Sora tzadikim b'toich, which is much more likely to find in a place like Sdoim, Vosido the ganze Masu, Matan Chamishim, and so on and so forth. So he said as follows. The Gemara in Baba Kama in Dafnun steht Tonu Rabbonon Maise bebitoi shel Nechunya Choifer Shichim. There was a person called Nechunya Choifer Shichim. Nechunya Choifer Shichim had boiros. He used to dig boiros of mayim for the Oil Regoli. Shenoflo leBoira Godel. The bitoi of Nechunya Choifer Shichim fell into one of the boiros. Bo v'oidius Rab Chanina ben Doisa. They came to tell Rab Chanina ben Doisa the tragedy. The daughter fell into a ditch. Shor Rishono Omar Lahem Sholim. After an hour, Rab Chanina ben Doisa says Sholim. Shor Shniye Omar Lahem Sholim. Shor Shlishis Omar Lahem also. After 3 hours, he says, without being there, so Rab Chanina ben Doisa also, she definitely is out of the boir. Omru lo, mi heluch, who is the one who took you out of the boar? Omru lohem zochor shel rechelim nizdamen li, vezoken ochod manigoy. It was a zochor from rechelim. They say it's a lakeda. Rashi Teisus brings down, zoken is Avram Avinu, and the schus hakeda, there were matzel here. It was definitely a pi derech nes. Omru loy, they went to Rab Chanina ben Doisa, ve'omru loy, noviato. Are you a novi? How did you know about it? Omar loem loy novi anoichi ve'lo ben novi anoichi. Elakach omarti, dover shenitztaer bo tzadik ikoshel beizarei. Rab Chanina, Nechunya Choifer Shichim is the guy. He's the person that nitztaer tzach gemutzet os meise nefesh given and digging boirei shel mayim to be mezakeh the rabbim for oil regolim. Ikoshel beizarei in the zelbe bar is going to have his own daughter loses her life falling into that boirei mayim. Lo novi v'lo ben novi anoich. Omar Rav Ocho afal pichein from deswegen meis bnoi batzomo. The son of Nechunya Choifer Shichim. After this whole story, many years later, his son fell into, didn't fall in, but he made batzom. He was thirsty, he didn't have enough water to drink, and he died from dehydration. Shenemar usvivov nisaro me'oid melamed shakadosh baruch hu medaktek im chasidov afilu kachit asayich. So comes along, shita mekubetzes, tzachbeini yoyne. And fragt ze, ve'afal gav de meis b'noi batzomo. Right? lo nichshal beoiso dover mamish. So the first teretz is the daughter fell into the boyer, mamish she fell into the boyer. So after reinpassen sagen avot von dover shin style bezot yikoshel beizar. He died batzom with something somewhat related, so it's not exactly what he was nitztaya by tzaddik. Imela azat tragedya can passieren also by nechun yeshei choyfeshich. Ulerabbeinu nire. Listen to a lashon of the Shita Mekubetzes. I think it's Rabbeinu Yoina. Ulerabbeinu nire leforesh. Omarti, klomar ishmati dover ze. It says when they came over to him, they asked him, Noviato, Omar lohem elakach omarti. Listen to the words of the Shita Mekubetzes, the Rishonim. כלומר, השמעתי דובר זה לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, והם דובר שנצטער בו צדיק, והסכים הקדוש ברוך הוא לדבורי. Rab Chanina ben Doisa says, Omarti means to say, I am the one who said those words, דובר שיקושל בצניחו בצדיק, יצטער בו צדיק, יקושל בזרי. שכן דרכו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, שמסכים לסבורס הצדיקים שבדויר. Kodesh Baruch Hu listens. When a tzaddik like Rab Chanina ben Doisa says, Omarti dover she'tzta'er bo tzaddik, Kodesh Baruch Hu listened and he said, you know what? Sagt doch richtig. I have to fulfill his wish, and that's why she was nitzel. Ukshemeiz bnoi batzomo, sagt Rabbeinu Yoine, kvar meiz Rab Chanina. The time was meiz bnoi batzomo, Rab Chanina was not alive any longer. וכן מצינו בחגיגה שלו יום דובר בנסיפת דרקיע בשם רב מאיר מפני שלום מאחר עד שאומר רב אבו לאליהו מאיך פסלון אגוז מוצו בירס האיך לזורך הספסוילס והסכים הקדוש ברוך הוא לדייתו ואומרו דובר זה מכאן ואילך בשם רב מאיר עוד גזוק דתל זרב המאיר דיקבות he said a person could daven to the Kodesh Baruch Hu, there should be a certain anhoga if he has a asoga in Yenamido. If the person who davens has a asoga in Yenamido, he can daven to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Wie bald Rab Chanina ben Doisa hat weggestellt, as a sort statement, dover shen tztaer boi tzadik ikosher boi zarei, behechrech, that Rab Chanina ben Doisa had a asoga in this, moisod was heis dover shen tztaer. Mimele mit dem Svore can be matzel nefoshes. Od bagreich mit dem Svore matzel nefoshes because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is maskim with Svore Tzadikim shebadoyer. After Rab Chanina ben Doisa is not around, and Achach Yisrael, the other ones, did not have the asogas in this Dover Shen style, they could be mispalel. They could be mispalel as Afal Pichei Meis B'nai Batzom. He said when Avram Avinu started to be mispalel, is midos, is a soga in the midas tuva v'chasde from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the groich tazei vayt, 50 tzaddik. Avram Avinu did not have a soga of Hatzolah of 45. His whole asoga in the anhoga from the Kodesh Baruch Hu was anhoga of 50 tzaddikim b'seicha. After Avram Avinu at Avegishtot, the Eibishtot gehört, he says, Lo yaseh ba'avura chamishim. The world changed. Avram Avinu elevated himself to the next madriga. So he's working on 45, 40, 30 on a declining schedule ad asayf. It's a moira dikazach. He said, Reb Avram, if mil hoben hasoge in midas tuvoi v'chasdoi of the boire oilam, we can ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be manning in a certain midah, and that midah will be nana tavegishto the bria anders. This is the first word he said over from his namesake, from the Zay designer that tells it off. You know, but then he said something else. He said, as state, as Eli HaKohen, there was a story. At the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, it says that Eli HaKohen was a very old man, and Plishtim were fighting with Bnei Yisrael. Plishtim came into Ma'arocha and they killed Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael was nos lifnei Plishtim. They killed the Tzvei Zin fun Eli HaKohen. He had two sons called Chofni and Pinchas. And those 2 children were killed in the war. Okay. Then the last thing, to clinch it off, Nishba Aroin HaKodesh. The Aron Kodesh was captivated, was captured in that war. Steht in Posuk, listen to this. Vayishma Eli es kol hatzeoko, v'oyomar ma kol homin hazeh, vayish miher vayavo v'yaged le'Eli. Ve'Eli ben tishim v'shmoine shono, ve'enov koma v'liyochel liros. He was blind. Eli HaKohen, by the way, was Mimoisra HaTorah. When the Rambam brings down in the Akdoma to Pirush HaMishneh, the Rambam brings down the Mesiras HaTorah, the 42 generations of Mesiras HaTorah. Eli HaKohen was Moiseh to Shmuel, was Mekabel from Pinchas and the Zkenim, and Eli HaKohen was the Mekabel of the Torah. Vayomer Roish el Eli, Anoichi abo min ha'ma'arocho, ve'ani min ha'ma'arocho nasti hayoim. Vayomer ma hoya adovo bni. He's talking to the Mevaseh, he says, what happened? Vayan HaMevaseh vayomer nos Yisrael lifnei Plishtim v'gam ha'geifo gdoyle hoyso ba'om. First of all, there was Nas. Klal Yisrael is running away, they're losing the battle. Number 2, there was Mageifo gdoyle hoyso ba'om, they're getting killed, they're getting slaughtered, they're getting eradicated. V'gam shnei bonecho meisu Chofno uPinchas. And the end he says, Ve'aroino Elokim nilkoch. Steht the next pasuk, listen to the pasuk. Vayhi ke'azkiro es aroina Elokim, vayipol me'al hakiseh achironis be'ad yad hasha'ar, v'tishove mafrakte vayomes, ki zoken o ish v'choved, v'ushofet es Yisrael aboim shom. We're gonna learn Sefer Shoftim. We'll see that Eli HaKohen, he is not mentioned in Sefer Shoftim. The 13 Shoftim mentioned in Sefer Shoftim, and the 14th and the 15th are Eli HaKohen and Shmuel Zayin Talmid. But Eli HaKohen, when he heard Kazkiroy and the Mevaseh is telling him that Aroina Elokim is Nishbo, he can't tolerate it anymore. He falls off his chair. Shover Mafraktoi was Nishbo Mafrekes, and he dies. He says, he said that, I don't remember, I remember he said it over B'Shem Adam Godel, I'm not sure, I think he said it over B'Shem the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva. I not gedenk nicht sicher, but I know that he said it over. He says, when they tell a father his 2 children got killed, Klal Yisrael, he is the Shofet, he's a Novi, he's Ruach HaKodesh, he's Moiseh HaTorah. They tell me, Klal Yisrael lost the battle. They nas min ha-mulchama. These are Mageifa. Your 2 children are killed, and he's still sitting still. Ve'aroina Elokim nishbo, v'hi ki shmoya steht in Posuk. Aroina Elokim nishbo. That is causing the death of. You see that in alle nisyones hachayim, that's what he said. There is a person, koiches hanefesh, to cope with different nisyones. With the nisyones of a battle war that's lost, with a nisayon of Mageifa of Klal Yisrael that's lost, with a nisayon of losing the Eigen Kinder. There is an ability from the Mani Gadoyer, from the Eli HaKohen, to tolerate. Ubvayiki Shmoya, ki nish ba'aroina Elokim, amidem tavek the Torah from Klal Yisrael. You take away the Aroina Elokim, then vayipol min hakise vayomes, is no. He said, Zois nechomosi be'oini kimroscho chitani, chisoni. The einzige nechama is ein lo nishir elo aterazos. He says the Eibishter Machtan Nisoyan was a shveret kufa at the time as well. Matzav in Eretz Yisrael was not a poshter matzav. He says ken zayin ha-milchama, se ken zayin ha-matzav shveret matzav, se ken zayin ha-Eibishter nem zu akind. Aber wie lang is geblieben Aroina Elokim? If we have the Torah, we can mamshich zayin marbitz Torah, the yeshiva, we can noch halt sitzen auf dem Benkel, darf nicht vor. The Eibishter vayi nish ba'aroina Elokim b'mei Eli, then Eli HaKohen cannot anymore. I'd like to say something, you know. I don't know if you all know. Today is the Yortzeit of the Meshech Chochmah, of the Osameach, the Meir Simcha. Now let me give you a little history. The Meir Simcha was nifter in Shabbos Kodesh Parsha Shoftim Daled Elul. Today. Now is Motzei Shabbos and Shabbos. Daled Elul Tov Reish Pei Vov was a Shabbos. Meir Simcha is avek Daled Elul Tov Reish Pei Vov. Amazing. 98 years ago. In 2 years, it's going to be 100 years from Meir Simcha's Yortzeit. Eli HaKohen died. He was 98 years of age. I don't know if you know, but Rebbe Avremel, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, a bocher of 26 years old, he was always searching, he was always thirsty. He went into the library called Yova in New York. It used to be a library in Divos Vesen, started in Vilna. Used to be a very research institute with library with Kisvei Yodes from Rishonim, from Achronim. And they moved it over in 1940. They moved it over from Vilna by the war. They moved it over to New York, and it's an institution called the Yova Institute for Research. Rebbe Avremel went there one summer, and he found Kisvei Yodes, Nishmer Nishveinike for Meir Simcha. And the Chidush of Meir Simcha al Hashas, that we have a Meir Simcha al Hashas, they used to be from the Rebbe Yankel Moshe Charlap. He gave out the Meir Simcha, the Alta, very limited amount. He found the Tachrich Sovim for a Meir Simcha al Hashas and 86 Shailos V'Tshuvas. In Daled Elul Tovshin Lamed Vov, 48 years ago today, Rebbe Avremel put out, if you look at Chidush HaMeir Simcha, it says, L'regel yoytzel la'oyer moifia la'avir ha'oilom l'regel yom ha'zikoron ha'chamishim shel Rabbeinu Rebbe Meir Simcha. And the 50th Yortzeit. We are at 98 years, 48 years ago. Rebbe Avremel was a younger man, 27, 28 years of age. He took upon himself to publish it. And mitagoyes, miteores, in Tovshin Lamed Vov, he printed up on Broches, on Psochim, on a few Masechtes. Thereafter, Tovshin Mem Aleph came out. They gave out the Shailos V'Tshuvas for Meir Simcha. Anybody that has at home, shoot O Sameach. The Shailos V'Tshuvas Sameach was published by Meir Simcha, but over Meir Simcha was published by Rebbe Avremel Osban. He took it as upon himself, just a frish younger man. He worked on it and he put it out. Sai al Hashas. And Sai was Zeichel Avir Oilum. He brought so much of Meir Simcha, which was either forgotten or just quarantined somewhere in the corner that nobody knew about. It took a shtickle while. It didn't take that long to find out that it's a Meir Simcha. He's quoting himself, the Ksav Yad, Mekenzen Alzdin. He got the Askom of Gdei Yisrael, and he put it out, L'Avir Oilum. I say like this. Eli HaKohen was Nifter, Begil, steht in Posuk, Tishin V'Shmoyne Shon. Why Tishin V'Shmoyne? Steht in Goyen. I would like to quote a Goyen. Goyen. Zog the Goyen. Mishum hochi leiksi ve'eli zokin me'oid, elakosu ve'eli ben tishin v'shmoyne shono, lelamdecho shelekach zocho eli lichyois tishin v'shmoyne shono, ki u dorash esatera b'memtes ponim tome, וממתס פונים תורה, כדאיסה בירושלמי סנהדרין פרק ד', וזה ביחד צדיק חס שונים. Giving you over the Goyen. Eli HaKohen steht in Yerushalmi Sanhedrin was doirish every mitzvah in the Torah, any part of the Torah, he had memtes ponim for the Tameh and memtes ponim the Torah. 49 and 49 is 98 together. ורק לאחר שישלים נפשי לושן הגויים, בקדושת התורה, כל כך זוכר לתוספת מידס הדין לתארוי מכל וכל, וזוכר שיסקיים בו הפסוק דודי צח, ואודום הוא חי במספר צדיק חס שונים, ונהיה צח ולובם בסגולוס התורה וקניונהו, והזוכר לתוספת מירוק, ליוס אודום במידס הדין האדומו שתשלט בו, כדי שיהיה צח ביוסר, שזהו תוספס לבנוניס לחיי העולם הבא. לושן הגויים. I don't know if it's coincidence, but Rebbe Avremel shares a yahrzeit with Meir Simcha. He was nifter on Gimel Elul. He's going to be buried on Hey Elul. The Zelbet Yom HaKvura of Meir Simcha was nifter on Shabbos. The Levaya was on Sunday. The Zelbet Sunday Yom HaKvura Hey Elul, they're both going to share. And exactly on the yahrzeit, 98 years later, was dosis the 98 Yovs, the Goyen Zogt, somebody who has a koyach to be mehapich the Torah, sai b'midas hatuma, sai b'midas hatayra, lekam ve'lekam b'kol haifanim, is zoiche to doidi tzach ve'odoim. I don't know if it's a remez or balkoponim. Sivev v'mesoivev, they both share. The Rebbe and the Talmid who took out, who was matzliach to publish his divrei Torah, Barabim, we have the schus for the ganze generation, they both share the Zelbe Yortzeit. You know, one more nekude that I would like to say. I heard from him in a different Gelegenheit, and I think this was a shite in Torah, in Arbosas HaTorah. He was very much involved, I don't know if anybody knows, he was very much involved in setting up for his Talmidim. Every Talmid that wanted to open up a yeshiva, that wanted to open up a kollel, is Yodov Rav Loi Ba'afotzas HaTorah. And in the yeshiva he had Azasot, he made a good bocher, he went to a good bocher, zugeshtot a gute bocher mit a bissl schwachere bocher. He says, you want to be mekabel for me, you got to give others. And I heard from him a vote. It was a moire dike vote, mi kent das iber sagen, a sheine vote, I heard from him. The Mishnah in Sukkah, in Daf Mem Beis, says like this, Kohen, what happened to a Kohen who is a cotton? Toyer ha-yoidea lifrois kapov, cholkin lo yitruma bebeis agronis. A Kohen, which knows how to be noise kapayim, a cotton, knows how to be noise kapayim, you could give him truma bebeis agronis. Zogt Rashi, umikam yaochim choyim lo begoyren, aber mishagrin lo lebeisim yodea l'shem betayro. The halacha is you can really give it to a Kohen cotton. The problem is he can't be shem betayro. The hochi Tanya begmora the noisim ala anusa beyevomes asor im chukelem truma bebeis agronis chere sheite bekotten. V'kulo mishagrin lo batayim bebeis agronis el chukelem shebizoyen trumahu. She'en kol royav yoidim shu boki l'shemro. The little kid comes over to Beis Agronis, you're going to give him truma, he doesn't know how to be shemer the truma. Aval lebeiso mishagrim lehem abekiu makirim bohem, u'mishiyodea lifro iskapov v'poiras batzibur, akol yoidim she'evish teisairas she'en kotten poiras kapov, kedi ibrina b'megil daf chovdal, hilchol choychim loy, the kivish shu poiras kapov, akol yoidim shedina kegodl. So it says like this, B'emes you could give it to a cotton, and you send it to his house, you can't give it to Beis Agronis. But Kolzman, he doesn't know how to be Neisa Kapayim. You don't give him Trumas Amaisis. You don't give him Trumas. You don't give him. Once the Kohen, Lisa Kapov, he knows how to make Nesias Kapayim, then you give him Trumas Amaisis. And the question is obvious. According to Rashi, it's just an advertisement. The fact that you see that he's Neisa Kapayim is a probe that he's Evish Teisais, is a godel. Male people are not going to be Miranan that he's not Yoidea Lishmoyer Truma B'Tayr. But he said as follows. He says, Amoyer de Kazach. He says, a Kohen, a ganze Leben is eine stellt sich weg. What is a Kohen? A Kohen is a Mekabel. A ganze Leben. It doesn't go to the army. He doesn't go anywhere. He's sitting at Hashem and Naschil Kivikoisi Atatomich Goroli. Kohanim are basically sitting, Koeli and Galai to a Bakubing, Trumas Weiser, Chalukas Kochim. They're all Mekabel. His life is a life of a Mekabel. He says, Chazal Mavegishtold. You know when you could become a Mekabel? When you have the ability to be a Neisen. In a second, you Neise Kapayim is a Mevorach Es Amo Yisrael Be'ahavo. A Mevorach Es Amo Yisrael Be'ahavo. A Kohen could bestow upon his fellow friend love to Klal Yisrael. You are a Neisen, you could become a Mekabel. Kol Zman is Einer Der Lisa Kapov. Kol Zman he can bestow upon other this courtesy of Ahava, of geben, Ibergeben Zarzweite. If you're not a Neisen, you're not qualified to be a Mekabel. And that was his shita his whole life. You want to be Mekabel for me? You want to have the Klorkai, the Shiurim, the Havana, the Derech Halimud, this very unique derech that it Avegishtold Fateiset to Talmidim, show that you could give over for whatever you have. You're a little starker than you have, you can explain this here. You show me that you're a Neisen, I will make you into a Mekabel. You know, we don't have too much time. Remeir Simcha Bada Levaya, and I think this is a common denominator. Remeir Simcha lived across the street from the Rogatchover. Rogatchover died a few years after Remeir Simcha. They used to be neighbors. Mangala Befum for Remeir Simcha used to say, the Welt sagt that he has a photographic memory. Sagt ich denk sich auf dem. So Remeir Simcha ist ein Wort. Ich denk sich auf dem. Rogatchover hat das Zikor? Nechtike Tag. Every day he finishes Kol HaTorah Kula. Das ist die Kol HaTorah Gemara. He says he had the koyach to be in Kol HaTorah Kula at all given times, not as Zikoran. As a Izer. That's a word from Remeir Simcha. but Rameir Simcha was nifter. He said over that Iber gesagt Rameir Simcha, they came to the Levaya for Rameir Simcha, and they asked the Rogatchover to speak. Now Rogatchover had a gewaldige tchuna. He never ever spoke in public. I don't know if you know, but there is nobody that said he ever heard from Rogatchover a droshe that he ever gave in public. He was the Rav of the Hasidim in Dvinsk, but he never ever spoke in public for anything and everything. He came to the Levaya for Rameir Simcha. Now Rameir Simcha had a tragedy of his life. He was married to a lady called Chaya. I said today, Rameir Simcha said, they asked him, how does he have parnasa? His wife had a store, and she had a small little store, and she used to sell. And the money they used to make, that was always galt Rameir Simcha. They asked Rameir Simcha, Vana ote parnasa? He said about his wife Chaya, he says, Man de Yoev Chaya, Yovim Zayne. Whoever gave me my wife Chaya gave me the Mezainis for dort nobrich the parnasa. This is Rameir Simcha's avort. Unfortunately, they only had one daughter who was ill. Her name was Osnas. And she was married to Reb Avrom Luftbier, eine von Geine Poilin. He was a Wels genius. Unfortunately, he was Nifta B'chayav for Rameir Simcha. And together they put out a sefer, Zera Avrom Luftbier. Not the regular Zera Avrom that we know. There's a sefer called Zera Avrom Luftbier, which is a joint venture of Rameir Simcha and Zayin Eidim, with phenomenal tshuvas for Rameir Simcha together with his Eidim. In any event, to speak about Rameir Simcha, I don't think there's anybody in this generation that could describe or could have the asoge who was Rameir Simcha. Who was Rameir Simcha? He's godless in every iota, in every mikzoya in Torah, becharifus, bebekiyas, beyasheres, begeoines, in halacha, in agode, in remesh, drush, in kabbalah, lahafli, was poshet. And everything with such a gleichkeit. I mean, he's an ilu, you could see every vort is a ilu shavot, you can see the kishran all over, but it's all with the glattkeit and with this tremendous, there's a famous maise, I don't want to say the maise, but the maise of Simcha, somebody walked into him, he was shmeicheling, and he says, the Rashba sits in Beis Shemal Yisrael Chaloim, and he says, he sits dort naid in Dvinsk, and anybody that wants, I'll tell him later the story, Pshat Nigmor in Chulin, dort bei Chatzas Ha'oif and Oilas Ha'oif, bewusst der Meister was gedruckt in Chasborch, in the Akdome. But Rameir Simcha, the biggest nachasuach he had, that he saw in Cholem, that the Rashba came and Beis Shemayla, and he says, he sits dort naid in Dvinsk, nitzchuni. I wrote it to Torah's in the Girsa, you have to change the Girsa. And Rameir Simcha said, the Pshat and is gerecht. Rameir Simcha sagt, das nicht gemeißelach. So Rameir Simcha said about himself. But just to wrap it up, Rameir Simcha bei Zlevaya, they came and they asked the Rogatchover to speak. The Rogatchover says, ich red nicht, I don't speak in public. He says, mit ton nicht an home von Ameis. He had his sharfkeit. Nobody ever spoke in public, the Rogatchover. But by the time of the Levaya, Rameir Simcha, his wife died in Tammuz, Be'ois Hashanah, Tov Reish Beivov. But the Levaya from his wife, Rameir Simcha, turned over to the kever. He says, Chayale, ich komm bald, mit sich treffen bald. He knew he's going to be nifter 2 months later after his wife. It was a tragedy. His daughter died a couple of years before, and so is his Eidim. So he basically did not leave any zeicha b'olam hazeh. The Goyel Rameir Simcha, besides the Sameach, and the Meshech Chochmeh, and the Chidush and the Tshuvas of Rameir Simcha, we don't have anything. We have such a gift for the Klal Yisrael, for Deiros, but Lamaisa, he didn't leave any descendants, any children. They came by the Stimas HaGoylo, and they asked the Rogatchover, they said, listen, we know you don't speak in public, but we think there is an exception to the rule. We're going to bury Rameir Simcha. Ihr seid gewähnt a Rov zusammen mit dem. Rameir Simcha was a Rov in Dvinsk for 40 years. Ihr seid gewähnt mit dem Tzendikiyot together on a daily basis. They had a shaykhis. He says, Hoya Adin Neisen, he should say a few words. So the Rogatchover says, by the Stimas HaGoylo, he said a few words. I heard the story from Reb Chaim Kreisvers. Zecher Tzadik Levroch. He says, ich will sagen ein Wort. Kein ich sagen Kintere, ich will sagen ein Wort. I think the word is so appropriate to Rameir Simcha, and so appropriate to Reb Avremel, Zecher Tzadik Levroch, who was Matzliach and was Zeiche, Lahavi La'avi Ro'elom, asach from Chidush HaTeiros of Rameir Simcha. He said the Rogatchover as follows. He says, the Olam wundert sich. How do you have such a salt person like Rameir Simcha? Azag Gadlus never found, he says, in hunderte Jahren nicht gewesen Azag Goyen in Klal Yisrael. Bekol Mikzoyes HaTeirah, with such chlorite, with such genius, with such havana, with such kol razlei honestly, and the way he's medaktek in the psukim and in the words and every iota of Torah. It's a moyade kesach. Vi vert a mensch meir simcha. How could a person, we're trying to emulate, we're trying to copy, we're trying to clone, to mach noch the Rebbe. How do you become a meir simcha? That's what the Rebbe says. Says, ich lach sagen wie. He said, Kada vi Natalia, when I was a little child, my father was a handicap. I grew up, my father was on a wheelchair. The whole life I remember my father sitting on a wheelchair, my father they had to take him from one room to another. They have to put him in bed. 2 people had to come take him out of the chair. 2 people put him in bed. He had to go to the bathroom. People had to mishores him. My father was sitting there for Tzendik Yor. I was a little child. I never ever saw my father out of the wheelchair. Vahi ayoim, I was a little kid, 7 years old. There was a sreifa in our house. The house went on fire. Gekumen the fire leshers. They came in the fire department. And the house was full of smoke. I was sleeping downstairs with my father. They told us, get out of the house right away. They say, roll him out of the house. The house is getting caught on fire in the smoke. And my tata had gesagt, nein, mir hob a Schwester, a kleine Mädel, wo sie schläft oven. There's a girl sleeping in the attic, my sister. She's there, what's going to be with her? They told him, leif, in 2 minutes it won't be. He says, I will never ever forget this machazeh. My father got out of the wheelchair, ran like a bocher, 18 years old, jumped all the stairs upstairs, took my sister with fire, cloud of fire around her, jumped the steps down and came with her. And they came to my father, they asked him, versteh nicht, ich kann doch nicht gehen, ein Trop. You cannot walk 1 step. How in the world were you able to go upstairs where you are totally paralyzed and not able to do anything on your own? Or the Tate geämpft, as sie brennt a fire, sie do natierliche koiches. When a fire is burning, a person gets supernatural koiches. Person doesn't know he have this koiches. He doesn't know if I'm on this koiches. Or wenn sie brennt a fire, he do natierliche koiches. He says, gleich noch wenn my Tate is heruntergekommen, they took him back, he was back in his wheelchair. Ad yoim oisei. But when this fire went on, he was able to jump out like a younger bocher to the 2nd floor and save my sister. He says, Rabbi Isai bar Meir Simcha hat gebrennt a fire a ganze Leben. Meir Simcha lived under the fire department, smoke around him, fire, and he's running and running and running. He says, when a mensch lebt mit a fire, was sie brennt, a mensch bekommt natierliche koiches. If a person lives with a fire that's burning, a person gets supernatural koiches. You know, we're talking about the Nifter, Ad kan divrei Rogatshov Zecher Tzadik Livroch. Talking about the Nifter HaGodel Reb Avrom, HaGoyen HaGodel Reb Avrom Zecher Tzadik Livroch, who was matzliach to be Maimi Talmidim La'alofim, all over the world. Anywhere you go around, he's my Rebbe's Rebbe. He's already Rabbonim Talmidim, Talmidim. Avegishtel Talmidim, Bechol Tfutzei Stevel. In Israel, in America, in Europe, wherever you go, there's Talmidim for Reb Avrom. It's ashamed of her. Wie hat ein Mensch, wie kann ein Bocher, ein junger Mann, 27, take care of Meir Simchas Ksovin and be able to be Moitzim La'avir O'ilom, Bekatnusoi, Bebachrusoi, a frische junger Mann, unternehmen a Meir Simcha and take it apart with all the, you can see on the bottom, all the Agoras, all the Itzos. Reb Avremel hat gelebt a fire, a Leben for fire, so hat gebrennt a fire. His entire life was the fire burning underneath. And when a person lebt mit a fire was brennt, bakult men natierliche koiches. Tehei nishmosei tzrura b'tzrura chayim.